All right, it looks like we have Jane on as an attendee, but nobody else at this point other than the panelist. So you're probably good to get started, Tim.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. So I guess if there's no public comments, we can move on to agenda item number 1, approval of the January 11th, 2023 minutes. Does anybody have any modifications to those minutes? Anybody want a second approval of those minutes?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the January 11, 2023 minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Those minutes are approved. No, item number 2 is the Luxair report. Steve, you want to supply your report here or talk about it?
Yeah, we had pretty good numbers for February since the winter wasn't too terrible this year. Beating out both the previous 2 Februaries as far as fuel sales and operations go. And we've had a bit of a recurring problem with potholes at the entrance to the airport, which has been filled in a couple of times. But we might need to look for a more permanent solution because those keep coming back. And also a temporary sign that we have out north of the tarmac has been falling apart, and we might need a more permanent signage there as well. And that is pretty much all I got.
Anybody have any questions for Steve regarding his report?
This is John. I just have a question on Steve does that weekly safety check. We get a copy of it. And everything's fine except the beacon keeps listing it every week as inoperable. I think we all know that. I just want to know, Mike, or do we have a plan to address this? We need to at least have something in the works, I would think. But anyway, that's just my question, mainly to the committee, not necessarily to Steve.
Yeah, so John, what we did was we looked at where we could put the beacon, and it depends on the funding. So we did look at putting it on top of the police station, and that way it would be on city property, and we could apply for the emergency funding that the DOT would grant. However, it didn't make a lot of sense when we were up there. Let's say a bulb goes out, then we have to have somebody from Luxair go through a secure facility up to the roof to change that bulb. So it didn't make a lot of sense in that aspect. Jane also looked at, do we have some kind of pole that we can put on city property, which again, you got to remember that the city only owns the runway. So there was nowhere within the city property that we actually own that would not penetrate any of the zoning regulations. So there is nowhere there that we could put it. We could say put it on top of the FBO building, but then there would be no DOT grant to pay for that because you'd be putting it on private property at that point. So the decision was kind of made to wait and see what happens with the airport visioning team. And then depending on the solution that occurs with that, then we would move forward with the beacon.
Okay, I knew we had addressed it or looked at it. I just didn't know if we were required by any of the FAA requirements that we have to have, you know, that I didn't know where we were.
Yeah, from what I understand, we are supposed to have one because of the runway lights, but there's nowhere to put it that's not breaking some of the zoning regulations on city property.
Okay, so we could say we're addressing it. Okay, that's my question. That's all I just noticed that on Steve's report.
Anybody else
Steve,
have any other?
this is Bob. Yeah, Steve, this is Bob. The sign you referenced, what is that temporary sign? What does it say?
I don't remember all of it, but the biggest part of the larger sign is like authorized vehicles only to airport property, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, I got a question.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, thanks. Steve, on the operations tally, you've got that chart. I think it's on page 2 of your report. And I'm glad to see that February numbers kind of bounced back up, as you said. Weather, I think, was conducive to that. I guess the overall question I have is, what percentage of those or are we tracking the operations that are due to student pilots? Do we have any sense of, what the total percentage is that is really because of the flight school?
It's not specifically tracked, but it is, especially during the winter, going to be the vast majority of it.
I guess the follow on to that would be, how difficult would it be to denote student versus non-student operations? Would that be too big of a data tracking headache to capture that?
Yeah, it would, but I do think that the automated system that we have talked about a couple of times should be able to do that. I think that's one of the things that they advertise, that they can track the based aircraft and transient aircraft. And it might even be able to go more specific on to track certain tail numbers. And so you could separate out the flight school planes specifically that way.
Yeah, as well as other transient traffic too. So I don't know, Tim, I remember we talked about that system, and the question is there any logic to get that system in place? I think it was at no cost, if I remember the discussion. And then the other half of it is its installation. I don't even know how to phrase the question really. Is its installation sensitive to placement and future things that we might contemplate doing at the airport for enhancement reasons, that would then just kind of say, let's wait until we make sure we know what we're doing. I guess I'm trying to ask, is there logic to put that in place sooner or versus later? And maybe that's something that takes some research and we come back to it next month.
My understanding that it's pretty much just a few antennas that would need to be put up on a building. And the only cost associated with it would be the installation, the antennas and whatever other parts are to it would be provided by the company without charge.
But even that system is not completely foolproof, because it tracks ADS-B signals, and you could have a plane that doesn't have an ADS-B out system and it wouldn't track them. So, not just using people that have at the office. I mean, the office hours are the office hours. So anything that landed after that, you wouldn't be able to track either. So I don't think there's a perfect system. The system that Steve's talking about would at least collect more data and it would be more accurate, but it wouldn't be 100%.
Well, my comments were just just wondering if that doesn't help us. And Tim, I'd kind of, volley that back to the committee for further decisioning. It just seems like an easy way to maybe augment our data sets. That's all.
Yeah, I think it'd be more accurate. You're never going to get 100% of them because there are loopholes. I mean, there are people out there that don't carry all the equipment that would be able to be tracked, but I think it would probably capture 80% easily.
Question, I keep hearing at no cost. How do these guys make their money?
So they provide some of the information of the tracking that they do at no cost. They do also have a subscription, and I don't remember what additional features that you get from subscribing to that, but basically they're selling that subscription service to anybody who wants to know where planes are flying in and out of. But I think they're offering at least the majority of the services to any airports that host their equipment.
Okay, so would the information that we are seeking to obtain from this system be available to us at no cost? Or is it going to require participation in the subscription?
Yes, I believe that it would be. I haven't looked into the what the subscription provides. If I recall correctly, it's something like you get the past 2 weeks worth of data, and so if you're just every week pulling all the data from their system, then you would have all of that. Whereas you could go further back in time without having to do any extra steps if you pay for their subscription.
Should we at least pursue it and bring back the details?
Well, I think anything you can get for quote free would be a good thing. I just want to make sure we're not starting ourselves down a path where what we are getting free isn't what we want. So maybe further information would exactly how we would implement it and what would be available would be a good thing.
And what those installation costs might be.
So Steve, can you put on behalf of maybe the committee, I'll ask, can you put together the package for what's to acquire, install, and what's going to be obtainable at no cost? And then what's further available if you have to go subscription? And I think you mentioned something about the hosting airport may be able to get more information than just a basic subscription. Those kind of details would be, I think, important.
Yeah, I've already forwarded the information that I've gotten from the company to the city. I think I sent it to Alicia, and I think she forwarded on from there. So that should all be somewhere.
Steve, can you resend it to Mike and I?
Yeah, I can
Thank
certainly
you.
do.
What's the name of the company, Steve?
I don't recall that off the top of my head. I'd have to go digging through my emails to find it.
Okay, I saw some email about a kiosk, and I didn't have time to go through all my emails. So is that this or is that something different?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's the same thing.
We can just let that information get to Ryan and city staff, and we can move forward after they look it over the next meeting. Everybody agree? Move on.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? No? Okay, item number 3, I really don't have anything to report. It's been a long winter, so we haven't, I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of activity, so we'll move on to items for discussion and or action. Instrument approach update. Is that you?
Yep, I got that one too.
Yep.
So
Okay.
basically I got a email from Hughes Aerospace. So there's some acronyms that I don't know what they mean, and maybe you guys do, but I'll just read the email to you guys. So the email is dated February 22nd. They said earlier this month, the NRA for the airspace designation at C-17 closed. Now Hughes has been working to complete the final internal review of all documents and procedures and coding files. They have shared with the airport manager that they're projecting a publication date of the 5th of June of 2023 for the IFPs, and should be able to confirm that date later next month. So that's all I have on that one, just giving you an update on that.
Yeah, so when they say 5th of June and they say published, that means that there'll be a plate available hopefully in June. Is that how you guys all feel, John and Bonnie? Right? That's the gist of it.
Is it published final or is it published for comments? That's the part I'm not sure.
Published for comments, or is there gonna be the plate published? Well, the plates, there'd be 2 plates.
Yeah. That I'm not, but you know.
I don't know what NRA means.
I don't either.
Okay. Well. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, motion to approve the Iowa DOT application for burying power lines and the precision approach path indicator, PAPI.
Yeah, so again, this is what we applied for last year. I know Jane DaCosta with Anderson Bogart had a conversation with the DOT, and they felt that both were good applications. The problem is there's not enough money to go around. So we're just recommending that we do the same application as last year. I know that Councilman Grant has a few comments to put on the bearing of the power lines, just to make the language a little more, maybe more desirable to fund the project, if you want to word it that way.
You mean grantify it, Mike? So, yeah, let me just tell you what was in my mind there. And it kind of follows on from the last agenda item with the work that Hughes Aerospace has done on the approach plates. It seemed like there might be some information available to us that talks about the various obstructions and how they, how far they penetrate the approach or into the approach slopes. And I think that information certainly was in the ALP. And I was curious if Hughes had done a similar assessment as they developed their approaches. And so the purpose of that would be is if there was something that was, kind of specific to articulate those penetrations, that might be worthwhile just to augment the language in the application. So we do have some information. It appears in the ALP. The question was is if Hughes had assessed anything different or additional that would be useful to put in there to catch somebody's eye at the DOT. So that was the thinking. And I did grantify what Mike said.
Anybody else have any discussion items for this?
Just a quick question for Mike. This is what we did last year. Did we add an inflation factor or anything to it, or did we just rock and roll what we had?
So we'll make sure we look at the numbers before we proceed and send those out,
Okay, good. Thanks.
along with grants modifications.
It'll be simple, Mike. I promise.
I move to approve.
I second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion is approved. And then the last item, airport visioning team update.
Yeah, I guess that will be me, and Ryan will chime in as needed to fill any gaps that I create. So we did not have a February meeting of the visioning team. One of the things that has been impressed upon me, at least council colleagues, is that they certainly want to be informed of what long-term investment profiles they'll have to ultimately be contemplating for budget considerations. I mean, that's an input to the council, as well as it certainly is informative. Any budget or cost restatements are going to be informative for all of you, as well as the ABT. So what we did is I think, as you recall, Jerry Cyril of HDR had put together what we had generally called a right sizing scenario for the airport. And the question, was, well, what does that cost? And that in that report that Jerry published, and this would have been, I think, the middle of last year, assessment of existing conditions, which I think all of you have a copy of, those actions that Jerry recommended in that report appeared to be a subset of the actions from the original ALP. So example, getting a taxiway in, example, necessary ground side enhancements, tie downs, whatever else. And so we asked HDR to work with Anderson Bogert. So Jerry and Jane tag team on this to basically create cost opinions relative to the actions that were specified in the HDR report from last summer. So they've been working on that. There's some additional work to be done on that. And so we're hoping that within the next couple of weeks, those cost opinions and any supporting documentation are ready for general consumption. And again, what they end up providing all of us is a financial benchmarking as to a series of the near-term actions that would be prudent to do at the airport. I mean, we've all talked about fencing. We've talked about, a variety of things, the beacon, Pappy, the collection of stuff, all of that seems to be encompassed in what was suggested by the HDR report. And so we wanted to get some current dollars estimated for that to know what we might be stepping into. So that work is forthcoming. I would say, just let you all know, we're planning, let me get my calendar here. We're planning to have an airport visioning team meeting on Wednesday, the 29th at 3 p.m. And so that's the target date for the next meeting. And we're kind of hopeful that by then, at least this initial look, see at these cost opinions would be finished up for general consumption. So that's sort of the status, and I'll certainly welcome any questions. Ryan, did I create any potholes that need to be remediated?
No, sir.
So Tim, any questions or comments?
Grant, is that meeting, you Zoom that or you do it in person?
No, I think just we're gonna have to have that as a Zoom-based meeting with some in-building participation.
I just didn't know if the public could jump on and watch it if they wanted to.
They can. It's this is it is governed by the open meetings laws. So when this group does convene a quorum, it is required that it be accessible to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Now, John, in this case, you're the public.
Yeah, that'd be public, yes.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Tim, that's all I've got on that item.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, then I guess we'll just adjourn. Have a good night.
Okay, thanks.
No,
Thanks.
no.
I'll move my computer outside next meeting.
Oh, thanks for the warning. All right, take care all.
Thank you. Good night.